in your work. How many of you guys have been to 3 sessions this week or more? Wow. What are you going to get today? Woo, leather portfolio. That's right. Stop by this afternoon at the alumni office. So I'm really excited to introduce Aaron Hurst today. He's our speaker for this session. And I met Aaron about 2 years ago. I was at an industry networking event, and he was the speaker that evening. I was so captivated by what he shared. I went up immediately to him, gave him my business card, got his, wanted to connect, bought his book, and made everybody in my office listen to me talk about what he had presented. And then shared the book around the office, and so it's wonderful to have him on campus today. He's the CEO of Imperative, which is a company that advocates for purpose-oriented workers. And he's globally recognized as a social entrepreneur who works to create communities that are empowered to realize their potential. And he'll talk more about that. He's widely known for his thought leadership and is the author of The Purpose Economy. He's written for or been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg TV, and Fast Company. He's a LinkedIn influencer. How many of you guys are on LinkedIn? You should be following Aaron. He writes all the time. He's prolific, and I love his stuff. He's also a member of the nonprofit Times' Power and Influence Top 50. He's got a degree in service learning from the University of Michigan, and his first job out of college, product manager for iOwn. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. I thought you were doing the piano, so we could do a duet. How often do you get lectures with a piano accompaniment? That would be like amazing. So, other than getting a free leather portfolio, I'm curious why you guys showed up today. What are you guys hoping to get out of this besides a leather portfolio? Anyone? It's just a leather portfolio. That's fine too. Yes, please.
Finding purpose in your work.
You will have that within 5 minutes. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Fair enough. Yes, sir.
How to do your own thing if you don't like it well.
Yeah. Sort of make your own way.
Yeah.
Right on. Cool. Anyone else? All right. So we've got leather portfolio, finding purpose at work, and crafting your own journey. Does that work? All right. We'll see what we can do. I'd also love to know, I didn't go to school here. I'm curious just to hear, why did you guys choose to go to Seattle Pacific University? Anyone just willing to share? It's just always helpful to me to understand. Yeah, please.
I actually transferred from Western Washington University, and I just like how much more personal everyone is here.
Yeah.
Like all my teachers know me by first name.
That's awesome. Yeah, makes a huge difference. Anyone else willing to share why they decided to go to this university? Yeah, please.
There's a lot of opportunities to find mentors and just people who have more wisdom than you that you can look up to.
Always dangerous, but true. You have wisdom. You just got to untap it. Anyone else willing to share why they chose to go to school here? Yes, sir.
I transferred from Baylor University, and going from like a big school to a small school, like there's definitely like you get more connections with people, and you become closer friends.
More intimate. Baylor was in Texas, right? That's a slight difference there too. Texas, Seattle, a little different. Well, it's great to be with you guys today. I'm going to try to get through the presentation pretty quickly because I'd love to be able to answer questions and talk about sort of specific questions you have as you're approaching your careers, as you're thinking about what does life after school look like. So that's to be my goal. I believe strongly that everyone has a superhero within them. I believe strongly that when we realize what it is that we are meant to do, what it is that's our purpose, we are able to do things that no one thought was possible. For me, what I came to realize pretty early in my life was that, for me, I like to help leaders act courageously. I find that people who are running organizations, people who are out there making things happen, that many of them don't act with courage. And as a result, they end up doing stuff that's not in the best interest of their organizations, people, society, and that we have got to challenge people to act courageously. And there's never been a time in history when we need leaders to stand up and be courageous, because we're facing some pretty big problems. So what I'm going to be doing with you today, more than anything else, is to say, you're all leaders today. You're going to increasingly lead, and you've got to find a way to tap into what gives you purpose so you can do that courageously, because the world needs you to do that. You need to unleash your superhero. That's the way I think about it. Right? You think, how many people saw Spider-Man? That movie came out like 20, probably now it's like 20 bazillion years ago. I actually remember because they originally shot it before 9/11, and it included the Twin Towers. They had to reshoot it because it upset people. So it must have been right around then. Do you remember the scenes where Peter Parker's like trying to shoot his webs in his like bedroom when he first learns how, and he's just like knocking crap over left and right and just sucks at being Spider-Man? Like that's sort of who we all are when we start. Like we're superheroes, but we don't know how to use our webs. If we're meant to be Superman, we don't know how to fly. We keep on banging into buildings. The key is to recognize what kind of superhero you are and to work on those skills of perfecting that so you don't knock over as many of your parents' lamps. That's at the end of the day the goal. My background, I've started my first business when I was 16. My most recent organization, though, was called the Taproot Foundation. It was a nonprofit, started in San Francisco, and our goal was really simple. I saw that nonprofit organizations needed marketing, they needed technology, they needed HR, they needed finance, and yet so many of them couldn't afford to pay for these services. And said, we need to find a way for the business community to not just give money, not just give time, but actually give their skills to help nonprofits thrive. And over the course of a dozen years, by the time I left, we had created a marketplace of $15 billion a year of pro bono services. It was 4 times as much as companies giving cash, and we had affiliates everywhere, 20 different countries around the world in addition. In fact, when we opened in China an affiliate, they surpassed what we were doing in the US within 2 years, which is why working in China is awesome. It's like anything you do, you just like drop like a little seed and like it just whoosh, grows. It's so much fun. This to me was the most amazing job because I got to work with the most amazing people in the for-profit sector, nonprofit sector, philanthropic sector, government sector. I got to work with the White House. Being able to work with the best people who are committed to the fact that without a nonprofit sector that's going to be set up for success, we will not succeed as communities. But this is what I heard over and over again from these business professionals who are doing pro bono work. People donating their time to help nonprofits. They said, this was the most rewarding experience of my career. Does that surprise anyone? Doing pro bono work was the most rewarding experience. And I joked that at first I celebrated. I was like, this is amazing. We've created Disneyland for work, right? Disneyland, everybody says, is the happiest place on earth. We had created the happiest place to work, the most rewarding work experience. We had tapped into people's intrinsic motivations, not their extrinsic. We couldn't pay them, couldn't promote them, couldn't give them, the company party. What we could give them was purpose and trying to understand how do we make that happen. But I left the Taproot Foundation to start my new venture, a for-benefit corp called Imperative, for this exact same reason, which is, with the exception of a few creepy people, no one lives at Disneyland, right? And we all know people spend too much time there after they're 18. We go back to our daily lives. People are doing pro bono work and then going back to their jobs, and their jobs were not fulfilling them. And I realized we had to figure out a way to bring what I learned from pro bono service into everyday careers. It had to become part of our everyday experience, no matter what our job was. This morning, 2 hours ago, about an hour and a half ago, I was at a golf course in Bellevue speaking to 160 life insurance salespeople. How many people think of that as a purposeful job? Anyone? One? People in the room were crying, talking about the stories of how they've changed people's lives, telling stories about a mother who knows she's going to die in 6 months and has to make sure her financial, whatever it is, financial plan is in place so that her kids are able to move on. Of people who are trying to figure out how do they care for their families. And it was amazing to see how much purpose went into their work and how moved they were. One guy said, I can't believe I get paid to do this. How many people would expect a life insurance person to say, I can't believe I get paid to sell life insurance? They had tapped into and approached that job based on connecting with the humanity of it and realizing the impact they were having in people's lives. This is that potential. We can find purpose in any job. There aren't certain jobs, and I'll talk more about this, that are purpose-oriented and others that aren't. It has to do with what you do. When we studied the US workforce, we found 66% of people are unfulfilled in their work. That means you guys are going to be fulfilled and the rest of you are screwed. That's basically like, think about that though. The rest of your lives are unfulfilled in this room. These folks are going to do fine. You guys are all unfulfilled. Think about what that means in terms of your life. Think about what that means for your spouse eventually, your children. Imagine what that means for your employers to have you guys sort of just hanging out but not really enjoying your job. Imagine what that means for your own health. Imagine what that means for society, that you guys are not fully engaged, that you're not able to be fulfilled. Think about that when you think about Seattle. Think about 2/3 people that are coming out of those buildings you see are unfulfilled. This is absolutely a crime. And it is completely solvable when people take ownership of their work and they decide to create purpose and not expect purpose to be something that's given to them. Before I go into what purpose is, I want to tell you 3 things about what purpose isn't that most people don't understand. And I didn't understand and often gave bad advice, to be honest with you, for a long time because I was carrying around myths about what purpose is. And I want to share these with you. If you don't take anything else away from this, I really hope you sort of let these sink in. Does anybody know who this lady is? I asked my cartoonist to draw an amalgamation, sort of a mix, of every woman on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Do you recognize her? And she is to speak to the first myth about purpose, that purpose and cause are the same thing. She is an example of someone who's involved in every cause, every banquet, gives money to everything, and is a miserable, unfulfilled human being. Maybe for you that's not being this lady. Maybe it's on Facebook checking off causes. Maybe it's about being involved in different volunteering or different philanthropy. But that in and of itself is not a source of purpose or fulfillment. We had people at the Taproot Foundation who worked in the nonprofit sector. They worked at causes and reported being very unfulfilled in their work. We often had them actually come and volunteer for other nonprofits because of that. I remember an HBO executive I worked with, and he came to me and he said, I'm going to quit my job and go work in a nonprofit. It was in New York City. And I was like, that's awesome, because he's trying to find his way. We talked 3 months later. He said, I took that job. It's the exact same job, and I get paid half as much. I'm no more fulfilled. We think that causes are going to bring us purpose. It is great to be behind a cause. It's great to do work that matters. It's great to be involved. But what we've found is it's less than 5 to 10% of what actually matters in terms of the day-to-day of your job and your sense of fulfillment. When I talk to doctors and nurses, you know what they say? When they're full of purpose in their work, it's not medicine or the patients that give that to them most often. It's their coworkers and their relationships with coworkers that gives them a sense of meaning. So we have to let go of this idea that until we found a cause or we're working on a cause, we can't be fulfilled. That's an excuse to say it's the cause's responsibility to give me meaning instead of my responsibility to take ownership of creating fulfillment in my job. Just again, why someone selling life insurance can have way more purpose than someone who is a teacher in a school. Because they choose to embrace purpose or not to embrace purpose. You cannot expect the job to do it. You've got to create it. Are some jobs easier than others to do it in? Absolutely, but it is not about a cause. The second is the myth of revelation. That you're going to climb Mount Rainier, get struck by lightning, and be given your purpose on a tablet. Has that happened to anybody? It doesn't happen. Purpose is not something that suddenly comes to you. It's a lifelong journey about discovering who you are and building those muscles. And they're muscles, they're purpose muscles. Muscles to be able to bring out meaning in a wide variety of experiences. And I was lecturing at Oxford in London, or just outside London, and a bunch of graduate students I was with, when I shared this, all of a sudden looked really depressed. And I asked them, why are you depressed? And I'm Jewish, and I was like, it seems like a good opportunity for therapy here. Let's talk about what's causing this problem for you. And woman said, I realized I went to graduate school to have a revelation. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what I should be doing. I'm going to go get 100,000 euros in debt, and damn it, there better be a diploma with my purpose written on it. Right? And slowly, most of these students from all around the world, brilliant, this is Oxford, smartest people in the world, started shaking their heads. So many of them had chosen to go to graduate school because they thought they were going to get a revelation about what they're supposed to do with their lives, instead of realizing it has to come from within. The final is the myth that purpose requires a certain amount of money. That we have to get to a point in our career where we have a certain amount of money where we can even bother to worry about purpose. That, oh, that poor person, they have no money, they have such a hard job, like clearly they can't be thinking about fulfillment or purpose. That is so patronizing, and it's so not the case. We found no correlation between purpose and money. If anyone tells you in your first job out of college, don't worry about purpose or meaning, like you'll get that later, BS. It's just not the case. There's no correlation. I've worked with executives in corporate boardrooms that are worth millions of dollars that are miserable human beings, and I've seen people who are one meal away from starvation, full of purpose and meaning and fulfillment. Do not let yourself buy into the excuse that has anything to do with money or where you are in your career. If you have a manager that says, you know what, stop being so entitled that you should have meaning in your career, you'll get that when you're 40, nonsense. It's about you creating it. You got to take responsibility for that. It's just total nonsense. And there's no better example of this than Viktor Frankl. And I don't know how many of you read his work here in school. This guy was a slave in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. Can you imagine a better job? Pretty easy, right? He found meaning and fulfillment in that experience. So if any of you end up at a job worse than that, you can call me and we'll talk about it. But otherwise, it's on you to create meaning and fulfillment in your work. So what does create purpose at work? Turns out it comes from three things. These are the three things that matter, and they're the same things that mattered for you as a student here at Seattle Pacific University. These are things you hopefully started developing early in life and you continue to do, and these are the only three things that matter. The first is relationships. The primary source for most people of purpose in their work has to do with relationships. It's probably the primary reason you've enjoyed school, is the relationships that you had here. It's no different at work, and yet so many work environments tell you, act like a professional, which just basically means be a robot. You know what a professional is? It's someone who can do the same thing multiple times with the same result. Is that what you want to be? It's about being human, having real relationships, having authentic connections. The idea that you're not supposed to have friends at work is ridiculous. And yet it's such a common misunderstanding in the workplace. Relationships are critical. So when you start your first job, priority number one, figuring out who you want to connect with and finding ways to make time for relationships. Don't let tasks, don't let stress get in the way of building real relationships. When you go to interview for a job, think about, are these people I want to have a relationship with? If not, unless you're in a really bad financial spot, find a different spot. You want to work with people that you want to spend time with. The second is doing something greater than yourself. That can mean, at a highest level, some level of cause, but that's not really what it's about. It's about, on a daily basis, doing something that matters to someone other than yourself. That's all it means to make an impact. If you do something that only matters to you, that's not an impact. If you make someone smile, you've made an impact. If you help someone's day be a little bit easier, you've made an impact. And it's not about doing like a huge impact. People who make a massive impact, it's like sugar. They go up and they come down. What matters is every day, as much as every hour, every minute, finding a way to do something for someone other than yourself. And the final is growth, which is something you guys have been told to do here at school, right? That you should be constantly growing. If you stop growing when you enter the workforce, you will find purpose, fulfillment, meaning will shrivel up on you. You cannot stop learning. You must constantly find things that scare the hell out of you. You must constantly find challenges that you're not sure you can take, and just jump in there and do them. Because if you don't take on challenges, and don't wait for your manager or whoever it is who hires you to give you those challenges, find ways for yourself to say, how can I do this a little bit better tomorrow? How can I learn something new? How can I take a challenge that I'm not sure I can succeed at and do that? And I'll tell you, the people you meet that have midlife crisis, who end up miserable in the middle of their careers because they stopped challenging themselves and just sort of rode on what they knew from the beginning. So I would hope as students you've practiced all these three things, but you need to constantly in your career be thinking about how am I going to be able to do those and to measure your success in these three ways. If you're in a job for a long time and you don't have good relationships, don't feel like you're making an impact, you're not growing, the first question is, why aren't you changing how you're approaching that job to make it work? And if you constantly try to hack your job to make it better and you still can't do it, quit. It's your responsibility to take ownership of purpose in your work. These are the three things that matter. And if you do these things, you will get promoted plenty of times, you'll get paid fine. This is what matters. In fact, what we found is there's really two kinds of people in the workforce. purpose-oriented people and non-purpose-oriented people, and they show up statistically in studies that we've done. There's a difference between these people. The purpose-oriented person says, I work primarily for fulfillment and to serve others. That's why they work. If you don't pay them enough, do they get pissed off? Absolutely. If you don't promote them when they're due for promotion, they get pissed off? Absolutely. But that's not why they work. The second are non-purpose-oriented workers who work for money and for status. There's a great story about the purpose-oriented. One of the things I hope for as a father, my daughter is 11, is you hope to raise your kids with these values, right? And I was very pleased the other day. My daughter came home from the mall. That part I'm not pleased about, but she came home from the mall, and she said, I got a job, Dad, and I'm so excited. All right, you're 11, but like what? It's probably illegal, but like that's beside the point. Like what? And then she said the thing that just made me so happy. And I don't even have to pay for it. She understands that work is about getting value and making value, and then in a certain way it's perverted that we get paid to do it. And that was her mindset, was she's like, I don't even have to pay to work. That's that mindset, right? What we've found is that people who are purpose-oriented tend to stay that way, and it's not about the job. You think you go from job to job, and some jobs you'd show up as purpose-oriented, others not. No, it has to do with your relationship with the idea of work. What is the role of work in your life? Is it a necessary evil to pay the bills, that you'd quit tomorrow if you could? Is it about the fact that you don't feel good about who you are as a person and need work to define who you are? Or is work about adding value to the world and fundamentally being fulfilled? That is the key question, and it's your choice as to how you want to approach that. In the US workforce, and we've looked at this globally as well with LinkedIn, 28% of the workforce is purpose-oriented. Another roughly 30% has the potential to be purpose-oriented, but is sort of sitting still a lot in the fear that prevents them from feeling comfortable fully embracing purpose, and instead still is worried about status and money. And this status piece, I want to underscore this point, it's not about being VP. We found lots of people who are teachers. We found people in every profession that are status-oriented. And I'll give you an example. I was driving by Seattle University. They're not Pacific. With an Uber driver. This is probably a year ago. And I bring this up because we're in Seattle. About a year ago. And there's a bunch of ROTC people jogging by. They have ROTC here? The military thing? So I'm a Jew. I come from affluent New York family. I don't know anybody who's done ROTC really. And this Uber driver said, oh, I want to join the army. I was kind of intrigued. I was like, this is cool. I get to like talk to someone who wants to join the army. I've never really experienced this before. And I said, why do you want to join the army? You know what he said? Did he say, I want to serve my country? No. He said, finally, I'll get some respect. That's that status mindset. That's why a lot of people go into teaching. Not because of purpose. Get respect. A lot of people go into medicine. Not to help people, but to get respect. That is that fundamental lack of self-love that prevents you from choosing the path that's right for you, and instead is doing stuff to make up for fear. What we found is that people who are purpose-oriented are fulfilled far more likely than those who are not. That psychology is basically you create the reality of your job. So I can get this to boom. When it came to impact, relationships, growth, people who are purpose-oriented and see work that way, a funny thing happens. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you simply approach work saying, I shouldn't have relationships at work, you don't have them. If you feel like your job doesn't make an impact, you don't think it makes an impact, even though the guy next to you is doing the exact same job and thinks their job makes a hell of an impact. It's all in your head. Oh, I like these build ones. They're very dramatic. Dun. I need to get like a music to go there. It's just like, boom! We found when we studied purpose-oriented people versus non-purpose-oriented people at companies like LinkedIn, at companies all around the world, as well as our national study, we did not find one data point in which non-purpose-oriented people were better than purpose-oriented people. Not one. We could not find one reason why you would ever hire someone who isn't purpose-oriented unless they're the last person available to take that job. People who are not purpose-oriented are fundamentally operating out of fear, and that prevents them from being good coworkers, good leaders, and good performers because they're operating not out of love and abundance, but out of fear. It's toxic. I work with companies now where you can't get promoted unless you're purpose-oriented because they know how toxic it is to have someone who's fear-based leading. This is why we do a lot of work with companies now to screen out candidates who are not purpose-oriented, because any employer who understands the research realizes that hiring people who are not purpose-oriented is a great way to kill your culture. It's a great way to kill performance. It's a great way to get all your best people to want to get the hell out of there. We need purpose-oriented people. And these are not nonprofits. I'm talking about big companies, technology companies, retail companies, etc. We did find, however, there are certain professions in which you'll find more purpose-oriented people, right? But it's interesting. Even in education, healthcare, nonprofits, majority of people are not purpose-oriented. On average, a teacher is not purpose-oriented. A doctor that you go see is not. Someone working in a nonprofit sector, you'd say, oh, that's a purpose job. Not for the majority of people in that job, right? There are certainly professions where purpose is less prevalent, not so much even because of the job, but because they're less attractive to purpose-oriented people. Jobs where it's harder to have relationships because you're isolated or more task-oriented. Jobs where the impact is less clear cognitively and where there's not as much growth tend to have a harder time attracting purpose-oriented people, right? It's not that they're not purpose jobs, but they're structurally set up to be harder. But people still find purpose, and we didn't find any profession here, this is on a global scale, that was less than 25%. Accounting here was the lowest. Anyone an accounting major? There's hope, though. There's still 25%. But this is because the thing about an accountant generally is not a highly social job, right? The impact is often, you have to think through like so many layers to understand what that impact is. And the growth often, you're not put in a position besides technical skills to really develop that growth as much. So you got to take that on yourself. But we find people in every profession that are full of purpose. Same thing with industries. We find certain sectors are full of more purpose people and other ones aren't. The least, again, here is accounting. Purchasing, finance, support operations. You see the ones that are more socially oriented, because of the relationship piece, tend to be where you find more purpose-oriented people. And guess what else? People often don't realize that part of the reason why women are such exceptional hires and employees is that women are much more likely to be purpose-oriented than men, 50% more likely. When we studied this globally, the countries where women are not respected in the workforce have very low fulfillment in their workforce, and the countries where the opposite is the case, you see that their workforce is thriving. Gender plays a big role. In fact, I didn't share this earlier, but we did a bunch of conversation with different academics who studied parts of this. And at Michigan, my alma mater, they did a study on people who just see work as being about money, right? People who say work, the only reason you work is to make money. No other reason. And in the sample they did, which wasn't massive, but in the sample of the people who saw work as only being about money, not one of them, not like 2, 1, 3, not one of them had a good relationship with their mother. Which goes to say what we're seeing here. When someone fundamentally sees work as only being about money, it's coming out of a deficit of something that they're missing in their lives. I love what former President Obama said. It's hard to say that. Former President Obama said to his interns last year, I thought it was at the White House, I thought this was a great statement. Worry less about what you want to be and think more about what you want to do. We get so caught up in the idea of like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an accountant, I want to be an astronaut. The only thing you'll ever be is a human being. It's the only thing you're ever going to be. And in this world, you'll end up doing a lot of different jobs. So it's unlikely you'll ever just be anything. You're a human being. The question is, what do you want to do? What is the impact you want to make? What are the relationships you want to have? How are you going to show up every day? Who is that person? That's what you got to figure out. If you hide behind a profession, it means you're not being honest with who you are. It doesn't mean you can't be a doctor. It doesn't mean you can't be a teacher, whatever it is. But that's not who you are. You are a human being. And you got to figure out what that human being wants to do in the world. Because you know what happens if we don't? We got major problems in this world because people are not operating out of purpose. And when you don't operate out of purpose, when you operate out of fear, you make decisions that are not aligned with your values. You do things that you would not be proud to tell your children about. You do stuff where you say, oh, well, that's just the way it is in business. That's nonsense, right? You can't say that. That doesn't make any sense. I love it. Campbell's, big food company, and one of their purpose they talk about is they only serve and make food that they would serve to their children. That's a statement of values, right? What I found in a lot of companies is a lot of CEOs, leaders create jobs that they would not have their kids take. That is a fundamental lack of values. You should never create a job that you would not be happy having a nephew, a niece, a sister, a brother take. Doesn't mean it's a good fit for them or not, but if you think a job isn't worthy of them, then it's not worthy of anybody, right? This kind of mindset where people are not working with purpose is what leads to decisions that we all know are wrong, that are destroying our environment, destroying fundamental democracy, that are destroying human rights around the world because we somehow rationalize that it's okay to operate out of fear instead of operating out of abundance. In our purpose assessment, we figured out basically that people get purpose from different things. And I want to share with you one of these dimensions just to help you think about, I think the most important one as you enter your careers, which is the elevation at which you gain the greatest sense of meaning. And hopefully that sentence made no sense to you because it shouldn't. What we found is that we all gain some meaning from things at different elevations, but that we have a core place where we gain the most fulfillment. So let me share with you what this means. And none of these are better or worse, and society is evenly divided among all three of them. We need all three. The first are people at the individual level, which is at the ground level, who gain meaning from helping other people, right? When I was at this New York Life event this morning, the vast majority of those people are individually oriented because they gain purpose from helping each of their clients help address the most painful part of our lives, which is death, and help them planning for it. They gain tremendous meaning from that. It's the same as a doctor who helps patient after patient and feels like they're helping them. I remember asking I think it was my fourth therapist, I asked him, how do you see person after person after person and not just be like, why don't you shut up, stop whining, and like, here's your solution, right? Like, that's what I would do. He's like, no, I actually see each patient as a unique challenge and gain tremendous pleasure from helping each of them at the pace that they need to move forward. And my attitude was, God bless you, because I sure as hell couldn't do that, right? But that's that mindset, and many of you in this room may be that way, that you gain meaning from helping other people by making an impact at that ground level. The next layer up is organizational and team. A lot of people, a third of people, gain the most meaning when they're helping a team do something they could never achieve on their own, helping an organization achieve something remarkable, right? And really oriented towards building amazing teams, building organizations, building social fabric. For a lot of people, that's what gives them purpose. They say, why the hell would I be a doctor if I can work at a hospital to help 30 doctors, 100 doctors be more effective, right? I can make the greatest impact by creating that environment where I'm able to enable others to thrive that way. And at the final level is societal level, right? Think about it in medicine and be someone who says, you know what, it's great there's doctors. They help people, but there's a lot of people out to be helped. It's great there's hospitals, but we've got thousands of those. I want to find a cure for cancer. I want to bring down the cost of healthcare in the United States overall. I want to be part of a societal change. Unless we move the needle on something, it doesn't fundamentally give me a sense of impact. I want to be part of something bigger than any one person or organization. So as you guys think about this, how many of you think you're most likely at that individual level? You gain meaning from helping someone. When you help someone, you feel a real sense of meaning. Awesome. How many of you would say it's more at an organizational level? And how many more at that societal level? Smaller number. Awesome. So a lot of individual, slightly less organization, fewer societal. We found these things tend to stay the same, but the more you get exposed to work and experiences, you may find that shifts a little bit. It makes a big difference in how you think about what jobs are going to be the best fit for you. If you're individual and you're in a job that doesn't enable you to actually make an impact on people every day, you're going to find a lot of days going home feeling somewhat hollow. You can still do stuff to help impact your coworkers, et cetera, but it's hard. If you're at that organizational level, doing direct service or working directly with people, you're not going to thrive as well as your colleagues. You need to be in a position where you're enabling the individual folks to work better as a group and finding jobs where you can do that. And if you're at the societal level, it doesn't mean you're responsible for stopping climate change the next week. What it means is you need to constantly think about how are you contributing to something bigger. And it may be a very small contribution or be part of it. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a social impact. I was doing work with Kenneth Cole, and one of the women who's in charge of design said, she's at societal level, she loves being part of changes in trends and colors. She's like, she knows next year is going to be orange, and she's excited to help Kenneth Cole find ways to integrate orange so that they're part of this broader change. Is that going to change the world? No, but it'll make the world a little more orange next year, which will make some people happy. But it's trying to think and always take responsibility for thinking about how your work connects to that bigger piece. I want to make sure I save time for questions. I think we've got another 14 minutes, it looks like. I wanted to share with you the 5 things I give as advice. I do a lot of work with employers telling them how to screen you guys out, the ones of you that are not purpose-oriented. I want to share with you how I recommend you screen them out based on purpose. None of these things are foolproof, but these are the advice I'd give you. When you go to look at employers, these are the 5 things to think about. Number 1, do they have women in leadership? It is very unlikely that it's a highly purpose-oriented company if it's an all-dudes leadership team. It's possible, absolutely. But it's probably a sign that there's a lack of meaning in that organization, that purpose is not prioritized. So take a look at who's on their board, look at who's on their leadership team, look at whether or not women are there. There are a lot of horrible women in this world, and I'm sure many of them will be in those jobs. But statistically, you are much more likely to find a job that's meaningful if there are women in leadership, period. Nasty women, I think they're called, actually, right? The other thing we found that really matters is there a clarity about, not necessarily the purpose of the organization, because that's really, it's important, but it's pretty fleeting. What really matters is, are the products and services they deliver, do they have a clear need in the world that clearly helps people's lives be better, right? It doesn't have to be that they save people's lives, but at the end of the day, does their product improve people's lives? So a lot of products being sold out there that actually hurt people's lives. And we have with science found incredible ways into manipulating people into buying and doing things that are not in their best interest. Do you feel ethically that whatever those products and services are have a real clarity of purpose and that their customers truly are benefiting from the use of them? Again, it doesn't have to save their lives, but just at a minimum, it should be doing no harm, and ideally, it should have a clarity of impact. Number 3, which we just talked about, alignment with your who driver, the elevation. Are you in that job with that organization going to be able to every day connect what your tasks are, what you are doing in your job to that elevation? Are you going to be able to see individuals' lives impacted? Are you going to be able to see the organization get better? Are you going to be able to see how it's connected to a broader impact in the world? You need to be able to see that for you to get that kind of connection. Number 4, the company, the employer matters actually a lot less than who the manager is you'll be working for. A lot of times, I don't like the manager, but it's a cool company. That doesn't work, right? The number 1 reason people take jobs is for the company. Number 1 reason they leave is because of the manager. You got to determine whether or not it's someone you want to work for and work with. And we found if you have a manager who is not purpose-oriented, that operates out of fear, operates out of status and money, they're going to be competing with you instead of supporting you, because they're going to want to see themselves succeed, and that's what's going to matter to them because they're operating out of fear. You've got to make sure the person you work for is someone you respect and who clearly works to add value to the world and to be fulfilled, not to further their ego or to make money. Those cannot be the primary motivations, or else you're going to find they're going to quash and make it harder for you. And then you got to think about the coworker airport test. Does anybody know what that is? It's like TSA, but radically different. Anyone know what it is? So imagine you're at your job and you're flying to, I was in Vegas yesterday, you're flying to Vegas, and there's a horrible storm, and all the flights are grounded, and it's going to be a 6-hour delay, and you're stuck at the bar at the airport with your coworkers. Are you excited, or are you going to go to the bathroom and try to hide there for 6 hours? That's the airport test. The people you interview with, the people you talk to, would you want to get stuck in a 6-hour airplane delay at an airport with them or not? Of course, none of us want to be stuck at an airport for the delay, but would you be like, oh, it's all right, we'll talk, we'll grab a drink, whatever it is, we'll get to know each other. These are people I'd actually want to be friends with versus I'll do the job, but I hope I don't have to interact much with this team. That matters a lot. So I want to stop there. Any questions on these 5 or how to test for them or how to think about them? Number 1, how do you determine the difference between a man and a woman? Is that one of the questions, sure? Karen, you had some diagrams you wanted to share, right? No. These pretty clear? Does anybody feel like they'd have trouble assessing this? I'm telling you, if someone gives you 20% more money, but it doesn't fit these, and you got another job that's these, take these, you'll make that money back later. It's really important that you make these choices because that's what's going to fill you. Yes, please.
Can you explain again the number 3 and when to driver?
So we talked earlier about how people gain a sense of meaning either by helping individuals, building teams and organizations, or feeling like their work is part of something bigger than the organization. You want to think about with that job that you're looking at, will you on a regular basis be able to understand the connection between what you're doing and either impacting people's lives, making the organization better, or being part of a broader societal change, depending on your own psychology. So it's knowing for someone like me that I should not be a doctor, right? But for other people, you end up with people who end up in management who should not be in management because they don't actually like building organizations. They're just really good doctors, right? You see a lot of people start off in medicine and realize they don't like patients. They go into research because they want to be at the societal level because they don't actually enjoy helping patients. They want to figure out how to solve these bigger problems. So just trying to think about the job and whether or not you're going to be able to be a part of that. Doesn't mean on the society stuff on your first job out of college you're going to be assigned to be part of the president's cabinet. It just means you got to think about, does that job help you think that way? Please.
If you're not 100% sure what elevation you get the most
Yeah.
fulfillment at, is there any ways that would recommend figuring that out for yourself?
I mean, I think the one thing I would say is your 20s should be about exploration and experimentation. You should sort of have an initial sense of what you think you are. Go into that job and just check in with yourself and figure out, like, when you have a great day at work, ask yourself, why was that a great day? And do that over and over again. You'll start to see patterns emerge about what actually moves you, right? These things sometimes take a little while to experience as you rub up against the world. And I strongly encourage you to think of your 20s as not trying to get to a destination at all, but just trying to experiment and learn about yourself. You can also, in my book, The Purpose Economy, it does talk through more how to evaluate those different levels. So that's sort of another option. But many of you, it'll take 5 or 10 years for you to really become self-aware enough and have experimented enough to know where you're at. Same thing with getting married. You just got to try and experiment with talking to different people, figuring out who you are, and realizing what fits and what doesn't fit. You shouldn't feel bad if at this moment you're like, I don't know exactly who I am. I think what matters is being open-minded and having that growth mindset. Any other? Yes?
Is the personal purpose profile still available?
It's moved to just be a corporate resource right now, but it is de facto in the book. So yes, in that sense.
Get it in the book.
Yeah. So it is there. I talk about, we do this within companies. I want to share with you, just sensitive to time. Oh, the builder slides suck. I want to share with you just an example. This is actually an article I just published today, an interview with the CEO of Ben & Jerry's. Does anyone like ice cream? Ice cream's good. And I haven't had lunch yet, so I'm kind of annoyed that I even have this up here. But Yostein is great. One of the things I loved about interviewing Yostein for the feature on him was that he was an immigrant to the US, but not in the way we think about immigrants, because he came from Norway. And what's funny is that he went to high school in California, and when he started school, he was put in American Lit, or English Lit, I forget which one. And after a week, the teacher was like, what is wrong with this kid, right? He doesn't talk, he never answers any questions. So she took him aside and she's like, what's the problem? And guess what he said? Nothing, he doesn't speak English. They just assumed because he was a white immigrant, clearly he was supposed to be in American Lit, not ESL. So he moved over into ESL, which was all Latinos, and it gave him an incredible appreciation for race and immigration and other issues, which really has inspired him throughout his career to really see work as being about more than just paycheck. I love this quote he gave. I'm going to leave it on this, and then if there's any final questions. So this is the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, right? To motivate myself to have an innovation program on ice cream, which in of itself is pretty cool, innovation in ice cream, right? Which I obviously have to do. So that's sort of what he says, like, I have to do this. And I do with great joy and pleasure. That was sort of a throwaway statement. I have to roll to the greater point, which is how do we change society? Every time he and his company looks to make another flavor of ice cream, the question is, how is this flavor going to change the world? Isn't that fascinating? His last flavor was called Empower Mint. And it was around helping with voter registration and overcoming issues around suppressing votes in the South and trying to build awareness around it. But it's not about the cause for him. It's about making a difference, thinking bigger, thinking about how they can make an impact. He talks about in the daily work. He anchors everything to the big picture. Even the smallest task, he's like, how does this connect to the big picture? So he doesn't get caught up because he's at that society elevation. He challenges his team to not think tactically, but think about the big picture. And if you think about the big picture and you want to be part of societal change, you need to know what the hell is going on in society, don't you? So he spends 20% of his time as CEO, which is a very busy job, just focused on learning. Those of you that are successful are not going to stop learning when you graduate. 20%, that's 1 day of his week as a CEO is focused on learning. How do you want to learn? How are you going to learn in your career? How have you found you like to learn here? Is it listening to people, trying things, reading things, experimentation? How do you continue that so that 20% of your job when you come out of college starts off learning? And if someone says, well, you don't get to do that, you just got to do your job. You're like, Yostein did it, and he makes ice cream, so beat it. So in the last 3 minutes, any questions, anything that you feel is holding you back from going out and embracing the fact that work is not about money or status, that it's about purpose, that you understand how you can be choosy about where you go to work and finding opportunities that align with who you are? I got 3 minutes. I'm just going to hang out here until someone asks a question. Any thoughts? You'd asked the question about how do you start a career? It's your own path?
How do you empower people? How do you, I mean, you find purpose driven people, but how do you empower them to keep learning on their own? A lot of times they're thinking on really places you are.
So how do you challenge other people?
Yeah, you value their ideas, but you don't quite understand them at the beginning.
I think it's listening and being an active listener. I think it's about constantly challenging people to say, that's awesome, you hit your goal yesterday. How are you going to do it better tomorrow? Never letting what you did yesterday be the high bar, but the new low bar you have to go over for the next day. It's about finding out what scares the shit out of them and giving them the courage to try it, right? It's about letting them fail and knowing that failing is not going to cause them to lose their job. And again, assuming failing isn't like killing somebody or what have you. But to let people fail, because if you don't let people fail, they're not going to have courage to learn. And we don't learn much when we don't do things that don't scare us. So how do you help people? I always say it's like about giving people enough rope to be able to really run to the point where they can really hurt themselves. Because if they don't do that, it's too safe. So those things I think really matter with folks when you're trying to get them to sort of embrace learning and purpose. Any other? And I think in terms of your own journey, I think it's, as I was sharing with your colleague, I think the important thing is that you just experiment with a lot of different types of jobs, a lot of different kinds of cultures. Go out and sort of figure out who you are. I think it's a stat. The average millennial is going to have 38 different jobs in their career. So like, don't sweat the first one too much. Like, I remember I was so stressed out. Like, what am I going to do? What's my first job? It's like such a big thing. Just get that one out of the way so you can go on to number 37, right? Which is not to scare you, but it's just to get you to think like nothing in this is permanent. It's not that big of a decision. You can move on and be constantly looking for ways to have better relationships, make a greater impact, and to grow. So with that, I want to thank you guys for being interested in this topic, for the work you have done, and more importantly, for the work you're going to do. You're going to be working for the next 40 or 50 years, and in that time, you have the chance to change millions of lives. In advance, I want to thank you for having the courage to do that, and have a great weekend.